They thought I'd disappear quietly. That once they stripped everything from me, I'd crawl away and never look back. They were wrong. I remember the exact moment I knew my life had changed. I was standing in the kitchen of my childhood home, holding a bottle of sparkling water because my brother had taken the last beer without asking. Again, and my phone buzzed with an email that made my hands shake. Subject line: offer letter. Senior financial analyst, Hargrove Capital. Base salary $112,000. Full benefits, start date October 1st. I'd been working toward that moment for 6 years. 6 years of night classes while working full-time at a regional bank. 6 years of skipping vacations, saying no to brunches, eating lunch at my desk while everyone else went out. My roommate at the time used to tease me that I'd become a monk. Maybe she wasn't wrong. I stood there in my mother's kitchen, rereading the email 3 times, and the first thing I felt wasn't joy. It was relief, like I'd finally proven something I'd been trying to prove my whole life. My brother walked in while I was still staring at my phone. He was in his mid-30s then, still living at home, still borrowing money from our parents for business opportunities that never materialized. My mother had never once questioned it. That was just how things worked in our house. He was the golden one. I was the one who had to earn it. I looked up and told him I'd just gotten a job offer, a big one. He glanced at my phone, then back at me and said, "Finance? You know those people eat their own, right?" He wasn't joking. He never joked when it came to my wins. I called my mother that night. She said, "That's nice, honey. Your brother is thinking about starting a landscaping business. Could you look at the numbers for him?" I should have seen the pattern then. I'd seen it my whole life. I just kept hoping it would change. I started at Hargrove Capital that October, and within 18 months, I was managing a portfolio of mid-market clients with combined assets over $40 million. My supervisor, a woman named Miss Calloway, who wore the same pearl earrings every single day and didn't smile often but meant it when she did, pulled me into her office one afternoon and told me I had the best instincts she'd seen in a junior analyst in 15 years. I texted my mother that evening. She replied with a thumbs-up emoji and a message that said my brother's landscaping idea had fallen through, and did I know anyone hiring? I was doing well enough by then that I'd moved into my own place, a 1-bedroom in a building with a doorman and in-unit laundry, which felt extraordinarily luxurious after years of basement apartments with shared washers that ate quarters. I had a savings account that was actually growing. I had a 401k. I had, for the first time in my adult life, a sense that I was building something real. That was when my mother called to tell me she and my brother were coming to visit. I should have said I was busy. I didn't. They stayed for 4 days. My brother slept on my couch and left coffee rings on my coffee table and used my good towels and didn't replace the toilet paper once. My mother spent most of the trip asking questions about my salary, my company's structure, whether I had access to client portfolios, how the investment process worked. At the time, I thought she was just curious. Interested, finally, in what I actually did for a living. On the last morning, over breakfast, my brother said he wanted to talk to me about something. He had an idea, he said, a real one this time. He'd been doing research. He wanted to start an investment fund. Small, family and friends, nothing complicated, and he wanted me to help him structure it. I told him that wasn't how investment funds worked, that there were SEC regulations, registration requirements, fiduciary responsibilities, that what he was describing was, depending on how he executed it, potentially illegal. He looked at me like I'd insulted him. My mother said, "I thought you'd want to help your family." I told them I was helping by being honest. My brother left that afternoon without saying goodbye. My mother hugged me at the door, but it was the kind of hug that feels like punctuation at the end of an argument. 3 months later, I found out what they'd actually been planning. My HR department contacted me about an inquiry. Someone had called the firm's main line claiming to be a journalist researching a story about financial advisors who misused client information. The caller had mentioned my name specifically. I went cold. My compliance officer pulled me into a conference room with a woman from legal. They were calm, professional, clearly not accusatory. But they told me that the call had been flagged, that they'd listened to a recording, and that they wanted to give me the opportunity to respond before anything was escalated. I had no idea what they were talking about. It took me 2 weeks of careful, quiet research and one very late night going through every email I'd sent or received in the past year to piece together what had happened. My brother had been telling people, family, friends, people he knew from the neighborhood, a few of his failed business contacts, that I worked in finance and could give them inside advice. Nothing explicit enough to be a direct crime, but enough to imply that I was sharing privileged client information, enough to make people think they had an inside track through me. One of those people, apparently, had complained to someone and that someone had called my firm. My brother had been using my name, my reputation, my career, to give himself credibility he'd never earned, and my mother knew. I didn't confront them right away. That was the hardest part. Sitting with what I knew and not saying a word. I called a friend from grad school who'd gone into employment law. She connected me with a colleague who specialized in defamation and professional harm cases. I met with him on a Thursday evening at a coffee shop near his office, and I laid out everything I had, the emails I'd saved, the names of the people my brother had spoken to, a screenshot of a text message my brother had sent that said, and I'm quoting directly, "My sister can basically tell us where to put our money. She just can't say it officially." The attorney looked at it all and said, quietly, "This is more than enough to start with." I asked him what starting with looked like. He told me. I went home that night and sat in my apartment for a long time without turning on the lights. Then I started building my case. I want to be honest about this part, because I think people imagine revenge is clean, that it feels righteous from the first moment. It doesn't. What I felt, mostly, was grief. Grief that my brother had looked at everything I'd built and seen only something he could use. Grief that my mother had sat in my kitchen eating my food and was already planning how to chip away at the thing I'd spent years constructing. Grief that I had to become a person who documented conversations and saved screenshots and met with attorneys, because the alternative was losing everything. I didn't want to be that person. I also didn't have a choice. Over the next 2 months, I did 3 things. I hired a forensic accountant on my own dime to trace the informal investment advice my brother had been giving, to document who had received it and whether any of it could be connected to privileged information from my firm. It couldn't, because I had never shared anything, but I needed the documentation to prove the negative. My attorney said that in cases like this, proving what didn't happen is just as important as proving what did. I also, carefully and without drama, contacted several of the people my brother had spoken to. I was honest with them. I told them I'd become aware that my brother had implied I was providing guidance, and I wanted them to know that was not accurate, and that I had documentation confirming I had never shared client information with anyone outside of my professional obligations. A few of them were apologetic. One woman told me she'd suspected something was off. One man told me he'd already filed his own complaint with the Financial Regulatory Authority because he'd followed my brother's tips he believed came from me, and lost money. That last call hit me hard. Someone had lost money because of my brother's lies, because of my name attached to his schemes. I added that to the file. The third thing I did was go to my firm's compliance department and get ahead of it myself, fully and completely. I walked in with my attorney, laid out everything I discovered, and told them exactly what had happened before they could piece it together on their own. Miss Calloway was in that meeting. She didn't say much, but at the end she looked at me and said, "We appreciate you bringing this to us." That was the moment I knew I was going to be okay professionally. What came next was something else entirely. My attorney filed a civil defamation claim against my brother. The filing alleged that he had made false statements linking my name to his investment solicitations, causing material harm to my professional reputation and resulting in a documented inquiry by my employer. On the morning the papers were served, my mother called me 17 times. I did not answer. She left voicemails. The first few were angry. Who did I think I was, dragging family into a courtroom? We handle things privately. This is embarrassing. By the 7th or 8th message, the tone shifted. She sounded smaller. Confused, almost. Like she genuinely didn't understand how we'd gotten here. I sat and listened to all of them once, and then I deleted them. My brother called twice. He left one voicemail. He said I was overreacting, that it was just talking, that he'd never actually told anyone I was doing anything illegal, that I was destroying the family over nothing. I saved that one. My attorney wanted it. The deposition was held at my attorney's office on a gray Tuesday in February. I had not seen my brother in person since that morning. He walked out of my apartment without saying goodbye. He looked the same, mostly. Maybe a little more tired around the eyes. He was wearing a sport coat I recognized. I'd bought it for him for Christmas 3 years ago because he'd mentioned he needed something to wear to interviews. He sat across from me at a conference table and didn't make eye contact. My attorney asked him, clearly and specifically, whether he had represented to individuals that his sister, me, was providing financial guidance for their investment decisions. He said he might have implied that I had insights that could be directionally helpful. My attorney asked him if he understood that implying a licensed financial professional was sharing privileged client information could expose that professional to regulatory consequences. He said he didn't think of it that way. My attorney asked him about the text message, the one that said I could basically tell them where to put their money. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said he thought that was just casual language. I watched him explain himself for 2 hours. I didn't say much. I didn't need to. His attorney reached out about a settlement within 10 days of the deposition. We negotiated for 3 weeks. I'll be honest, it wasn't a large number by some standards. But it wasn't about the money, not really. What I needed was in writing, a formal acknowledgement that my brother had made false representations using my name, a commitment that he would cease all such representations, and a provision that if any future complaint was filed against me professionally that could be traced to his conduct, he would be liable for legal fees and damages. I also asked for one more thing, and my attorney told me it was unusual but not unenforceable. I asked that my mother sign as a witness to the agreement, that she be present in the room when my brother signed. She didn't want to come. I was told she said it was unnecessary drama. My attorney conveyed that the condition was non-negotiable. She came. The signing happened on a Thursday afternoon. My attorney's conference room had floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the street below. I arrived early. I sat with a cup of coffee and watched people walk by on the sidewalk, ordinary people on ordinary Thursdays. And I thought about the version of me that had stood in my mother's kitchen 6 years ago, shaking, holding her phone, reading an email that felt like proof I existed. My brother came in with his attorney. He didn't look at me. My mother came in behind them. She was wearing a coat I didn't recognize. She looked older than I remembered, and for one small disloyal moment, I felt sorry for her. Then I remembered the thumbs-up emoji, the 17 voicemails, the way she'd sat in my kitchen asking questions she was using to plan something against me. The feeling passed. The agreement was laid out on the table. My brother's attorney walked him through it. My brother signed each page without reading carefully. I could tell because his pen moved too fast. His attorney signed. My attorney signed. Then the agreement was slid across the table to my mother. She looked at it for a long moment. Then she looked at me, for the first time since she'd walked into the room. "Is this really necessary?" she said. I held her gaze. "Yes," I said. "It is." She picked up the pen. She signed. That was the last thing either of us said to each other in that room. People ask me sometimes, when I've told pieces of this story to people I trust, whether I feel guilty, whether I wish I'd handled it differently, whether I feel sad about how things ended with my family. The honest answer is yes and no, and it's complicated, and I've stopped expecting the feelings to be simple. I feel sad about the family I didn't have. The mother who would have called me with something other than requests. The brother who might have been proud of me instead of threatened. That family doesn't exist, and probably never did, and mourning a thing that was never real is one of the stranger kinds of grief. But I don't feel guilty. I built something real. Someone tried to dismantle it using my own name. I protected myself. That's not cruelty. That's survival. After the settlement was finalized, I took 2 weeks off work. I drove down to the Outer Banks. I'd always wanted to go in the off-season, when it's quiet and the light is different. And I stayed in a small rental house 1 block from the water. I ran every morning. I ate well. I slept a full 8 hours every night for the first time in as long as I could remember. I read 3 books. I called a few friends who had been patiently waiting for me to resurface. On the last morning, I sat on the porch with coffee and watched the sun come up over the water. And I thought, I did not let them take this from me. That felt like enough. When I got back, Miss Calloway called me into her office. The inquiry had been formally closed. My firm had received documentation from my attorney's office, and their own compliance investigation had confirmed no breach. She told me my record was clean. She told me my year-end review was coming up, and that she had some thoughts she wanted to share then. Then she said something I've thought about many times since. She said, "In 20 years, I've seen a lot of people panic when something like this happens to them. They make it worse. You made it better. That's not nothing." I thanked her. I meant it. My year-end review came 6 weeks later. I was promoted to senior analyst and given a team of 2 junior associates to manage. I also received a bonus that was, to put it gently, more than my total salary had been when I started at the firm. I transferred a portion of it into my savings account, With another portion, I funded a scholarship through a community foundation in my city, $10,000 a year for 3 years, designated for first-generation college students pursuing finance or economics degrees. No announcement, no press release. My name wasn't on it. I just wanted something real to exist because I had existed. I haven't spoken to my brother since the signing. I haven't spoken to my mother either, though I know through someone peripherally connected to the family that she tells people we had a falling out. That's one way to describe it. I don't spend much time thinking about what they say. That took work. Actively choosing, again and again, not to give them space in my head that they hadn't earned. But it gets easier. Most things do eventually if you let them. What I think about more is the woman I was becoming, somewhere in that terrible year. The one who got very quiet and very careful, and learned to document everything and trust almost no one, and sit with enormous amounts of uncertainty without breaking. I don't entirely love what I had to become, but I understand it. And I think she, that version of me, did the best she could with what she had. That feels like something worth holding on to. If you're watching this and you're in something similar, if someone in your family is using your name, your work, your reputation as raw material for their own use, I want to say something clearly. You are allowed to protect yourself. You are allowed to get an attorney. You are allowed to stop answering the phone. You are allowed to value what you've built enough to defend it. Loving your family and holding them accountable are not opposites. I spent a long time believing they were. That belief cost me more than the lawsuit ever did. I'm done paying that particular debt. And on the really good days, the days when I'm running along the river near my apartment in the early morning, or sitting across from a client and watching their face when the numbers finally make sense, or getting a notification from the community foundation that this year's scholarship recipient has been selected. On those days, I feel something I don't quite have a word for. It's somewhere between peace and pride. It's quiet, and it's mine, and nobody can take it from me. Not anymore. I used to think that people who hurt you always know exactly what they're doing. That there's some conscious moment where they look at you, make a choice, and decide you're worth less than what they want. But I don't think that's always true. I think sometimes people just never learn to see you as separate from themselves, as someone with your own stakes, your own years of work, your own thing that could be broken. My brother didn't think he was destroying my career. I genuinely believe that. He thought he was borrowing something that should have been available to him anyway. That's almost worse. But here's what I've come to understand. Slowly. The way you understand most things that actually matter. Actions have weight whether or not the person taking them understands that weight. My brother's words, casual, offhand, said over coffee to people he wanted to impress, landed in my professional record as a formal compliance inquiry. The gap between his intention and his impact was enormous, and I was the one living inside that gap. Understanding his psychology didn't protect me. Only documentation did. Only showing up with evidence did. Only refusing to be quiet did. That's the part nobody tells you about integrity. It's not just about being honest. It's about being willing to defend your honesty when someone else tries to rewrite it. I spent years building a reputation on accuracy, on getting the numbers right, on being the person in the room who could be trusted with other people's financial futures. And when my brother started attaching my name to things I hadn't said and hadn't done, the most ethical thing I could do was fight back. Loudly. Through proper channels. With documentation. There's a version of me that would have called him, cried, begged him to stop, and hoped for the best. That version of me would have lost everything. Not because she was weak, but because she would have brought feelings to a situation that required facts. Miss Calloway said something to me I've turned over many times since. That most people make things worse when they panic. I didn't panic. I got quiet and I got organized and I trusted the process I'd spent years learning to trust. The process of gathering information before drawing conclusions, of building a case before making a move. That's not coldness. That's the skill I'd been developing my whole career, applied to the hardest problem I'd ever faced. And that's the thing about who you become through your work, through your actual effort over actual years. Those skills don't stay in the office. They're yours. They go where you go. They protect you in ways you didn't even know you were preparing for. My mother wanted me to handle it privately, to absorb the damage and keep the peace and protect an image of family that had already cost me more than I could afford. I chose myself instead, not out of bitterness, out of the clear-eyed recognition that I had built something real, and real things are worth protecting. I think that's what people miss when they watch someone fight back. They see the conflict. They don't see the years of discipline and restraint and quiet work that made the fight worth having. You don't defend something you don't value. I valued what I built, so I defended it. That's not revenge, that's self-respect.